Before we can talk about making subtle edits to digital elevation models, it's important to understand how an elevation model is stored as a grayscale image and how these edits will affect the terrain. So here I've got this terrain that we were just working with in Natural Scene Designer opened up in Photoshop, and you can see that this is a TIFF file, and it's just a grayscale image where the white areas represent the high elevations and the black areas represent the lowest elevation. This is a 16-bit TIFF file, which you can see is represented right up here, and if we go to image and mode, you can see that it's 16 bits, and that means that there are over 65,000 different values that can be stored within this image to represent the range between the low elevation and the high elevation. And in this image, even though the elevation range spans just a little more than 1,000 meters, we've stretched the values of the elevation across the entire 65,000 value range of this image. The 65,000 is 2 to the 16th. That's why it's 16 bits. So because this is just storing elevation as the value of the pixels in this image, if we make some of these pixels lighter, then that will store higher elevation. So to demonstrate that, let's come over and grab the brush tool here. And I'm just going to make sure that my foreground color is white. So I'm just going to reverse these two color swatches, the foreground and the background, so that my foreground is white, and therefore I'll be painting white onto this image. And I'm going to make two sort of slashes across this image with this white brush. The first, I'll right click here and make sure that my hardness is set all the way up to 100%. I'll make my brush just a little bit larger. And that's going to give me a really crisp boundary. I'll just make sure that my flow is set up here to 100% so that I'll be drawing pure white across the screen. So there I'm going to make this white slash there, and then I'll right click again and set my hardness all the way down to 0 so that I'm going to get sort of a fuzzy boundary around my brush. So I'll make that slash there. Now when I save this image, I'll come up to File and hit Save, and then go into Natural Scene Designer. I'll open this image by going up to File and say Import Grayscale DEM. And from there, I can go and just open up this TIFF, which I've edited in Photoshop. I'll open it up. It'll ask me what the elevation range of this TIFF is, because remember, we just stretched all the elevation values between 0 and a value that's just greater than 65,000, and so it needs to know how to restretch that so that it coordinates with actual elevation values. And so I've written down that the elevation range for this TIFF is between 1,336 meters and a minimum of 21 meters, and I'm going to scale the elevation to that range. I'll hit OK, and we'll open this image up. If I grab the magnifying glass and then hold Shift, I can zoom out just by clicking. And we can see those slashes that we made across the landscape pretty well. And we can see that the difference, if I zoom in here just a little bit, between the two is that this one, which I made with a very hard-edged brush, has a very hard edge to this plateau, whereas the one that I made with the soft-edged brush looks a little bit more like a hill with rounded edges. If I move my camera, so I'm going to come and grab this little X here, set the position of my camera just by clicking on the map there, and then come up and grab the little angle rotate tool. Then I can drag around the angle of my camera and also how narrowly focused it is. So I'll focus it sort of at those two hills that I've made. And then I'm going to pan my camera up. Actually, I'll move my camera up so that it's looking down from above. You can see this very flat plateau that I've made with the hard-edged brush, and then this hill that I've made with the soft-edged brush. So by drawing light areas on this terrain, I've in effect raised the terrain, and if I was to have drawn darker areas, then I would be lowering the terrain. And this is the means by which we can make changes to this terrain in Photoshop. We're probably not going to make such drastic changes as this, where we're just going to put enormous hills or enormous plateaus on our landscape, but we can just subtly brighten or subtly darken areas in order to raise or lower them to represent other changes in the landscape.